Hi everybody! Thanks for joining me again today. We're here to talk a little bit more about some graphic design ideas. So today, as if you couldn't tell, is going to be all about gradients. We're going to be discussing a little bit about the different types of gradients that you can work with and some other cool things that you can do with them that you might not have known. So let's go ahead and jump into this. If you're working with Illustrator again, we're just going to come up to File and create a new document. Just like last time, I'm going to be working with a standard letter size, 8.5 by 11, except I'm going to be working in pixels. And we're going to go ahead and click Create. There we go. So for starters, let's just go ahead and explore the different types of gradients that we do have available here. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a nice square here so that we can go ahead and look at it. Now over on the left-hand panel here, I have two little squares. One is a filled square and one of them is kind of an outlined square. Those are going to be the different colors for both your fill and your stroke. So if I can click on that stroke one here, it'll automatically open up my color window here. I'm going to get rid of the stroke for now so that we can just focus on the fill. So go ahead and go up to Windows and let's go ahead and scroll down to Gradient. And let's open up that gradient panel. So I'm just going to click on the gradient, classic black and white gradient here. And this is going to be the first type of gradient I want to talk about, which is a linear gradient. And that's just going from one color to the next color. Like I said, it's a classic. You've probably worked with this a handful of times before. Let's explore this panel a little bit here. So over at the very bottom, you can see we've got little sliders. These are your gradient stops here. So if I edit these sliders in any way, it's going to edit the gradient that I'm working with in this square here as well. I can also, as you see I did right here, create an extra gradient stop just by clicking here. You'll see your mouse automatically creates an extra little plus mark there if you want to make an extra gradient. You can also delete those just by clicking on the little trash can here, so I'll get rid of some of those. And I'll move them back to their far corners. You can also, with this little angle button here, change the angle of your gradient. So if you want it going in a different direction, maybe a 45-degree angle, you can also do that. You can also choose to give it a complete 180. You don't necessarily have to do that by using the angle button though. There's a little button right here. It's got two gradient squares and it's got arrows pointing up and down. If you click on that, it'll reverse the direction of your gradient. So for example, if I want it at a 45-degree angle, I can click this reverse button and it'll maintain that angle there, but it'll also just switch which sides your gradient's on there. So that's your basic linear gradient. The next type of gradient that you can work with is a radial gradient, which you've probably seen before as well. And this has a couple of options too. Of course, you can slide your gradient stops along this here and really change how your gradient looks. You can change, there's not really much of a use to change the angle of it, but that does depend on the height of your radial gradient. So that's kind of a tongue twister. The more I say that, I feel like I'm just going to mess it up. You can change this, like if you wanted more of an oval, you can have a small little oval. And then you can also change the, angle of that oval if you wanted to. So if you wanted to do something different there, there's where that angle button's going to come into play. So if you decrease the height or the length of your radial gradient, you can go down in percentages, you can also go up. So you can make something really tall that kind of goes outside of the binding box and get something really interesting there. Lots of cool things that you can do with a radial gradient. So now we're going to talk about my favorite type of gradient, which is relatively new to Adobe Illustrator, and this is going to be the Freeform Gradient, which, as you can see, is pretty cool. I love it so much. This one has very specific points that you can click and drag around to really change the nature of your gradient, and it just depends on what you're trying to achieve here. So you can see you can get some pretty awesome color combinations in there, really do something crazy. Now, the way that these work, you have specific points, kind of like your gradient stops that you had along that little line that we were looking at earlier, except they're a lot more freeform, like the title suggests. So you can pull these gradient stops wherever you want them to be. You can add new points just by clicking here. And let's say I put another little point over here somewhere. I can also get rid of that with a little trash can or just by hitting the delete or backspace key. You can pull these out so that it gives it a little bit more of a different shape to that and more of a shine there. And then you can also change the opacity of it. So if I have this one selected, I can change that opacity, bring it down like to 50% or something like that. You can also change, now it's completely transparent. You can change the spread of it as well. So if I wanted it to have a much larger influence on the shape that I'm working on, you can change the spread and increase that and make it a larger color option there. So there we go. So that's just an introduction to all of the different types of gradients that, like I said, you have available to you in Illustrator. Let's go ahead and get into seeing how we can actually apply those into some type of illustration. So for starters, I'm going to use our ellipse tool and I'm going to make a nice big circle. Now the gradient that I'm going to be working with today is actually one of the preset gradients that you have available in Illustrator. If you come up here to Windows and you scroll down to Swatches, you'll see here that you do have a couple of color swatches, of course. You've got some basic gradient swatches right here. But if you click on Libraries, the little books at the very left-hand bottom corner, we can look at gradients here, and you can discover a whole library full of totally different gradients here. So lots of options to choose from. If you click these little arrows in this panel, you get tons of different colors. These Gems and Jewels ones are really pretty. I love these. I could just look at these like all day. They're so fun. I'm going to go ahead and scroll to the one that says Seasons, and I'm going to be working with Summer Turquoise here to fit with our summer reading theme, as usual. I like to have themes here. So I'm going to change this, though, from a linear gradient, which you'll see here has 3 stops. I'm going to change that to a radial gradient, which still has 3 stops, but I think it looks pretty cool. Now for what we're working with right now, I actually don't want to have the fill be the gradient. I want the stroke to be the gradient. And you're probably thinking, that's crazy, what are you doing there? Let me show you. I'm going to go ahead and just swap those and have my stroke be the gradient, which you can't really tell right now. So let's open up Window, scroll down to Stroke, and open up our stroke panel. And let's make this stroke a lot bigger. Now the bigger it gets, the more you can actually see there is a bit of a gradient there. So I'm going to change this from a regular line to a dashed line, and I think you probably have a good idea of where I'm going with this now. Let me see if I can even this out a little bit. That looks good. So to get these nice radial like sun rays, I'm just going to go ahead and keep going farther and farther out until I have these middle points here, and I'll zoom in on it so you can see until these middle points are just about touching. That's about good. I'm going to zoom back out, and then as you can see, this is not a shape, this is still a stroke. So here's our original shape. We've just manipulated the stroke and the fill on that until we've got these really cool radial lines. If I want to do any more with it though, I'd probably like to have it be an actual shape and not just a stroke that I can't really play with. So if I come up to Object, I'm going to click Expand. You'll have this dialog box pop up. You'll just click OK. And there we go. It's now an actual shape. If I double click on it, I have individual rays here that I could change if I wanted to. I'm going to leave them all uniform for now though. Scoot these boxes out of the way. Move my panels around so that I can play around. Zoom out, and I'm going to actually end up making this go all the way outside of the border of our artboard here. Now just like we did last time, I'm going to use our eraser tool, By holding down the Option key and clicking and dragging, I'm just going to get rid of everything that's outside, all the information outside of our artboard here, so that I can kind of have a nice clean workspace. There we go. So this is going to be the start of our cool little sunshine-like illustration. I'm also going to come over here to where it says ellipse, and let's just draw another circle here, holding down the Shift key. I'm going to do my best to keep that right in the center there. So what I'm going to do now, you'll see that it has automatically populated to the last gradient that we used, which is great. I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of that, pull this over here, and I'm going to go ahead and change this into a freeform gradient. So luckily it did keep some of the colors that I was working with before, but not all of them, which is why I decided to make a little copy over here so that I could use our color picker tool, or our little eyedropper tool, to come through and make a couple of different colors and add some more definition to this little bubble that we have in the center here. So I'm just going to go ahead and play around with this. You can do the same if you're following along. Remember, you can just go through and add points whenever you want. You can use the eyedropper tool to come pick up some colors. All right, and then now I'd love to show you another really fun thing. When you're drawing points, you see here that you have the option to draw, and you have the option for lines. If you click on lines, I'm going to just click here, and then you can see that I can draw a nice little curved edge there, which is super fun if you're creating some type of shadow to a curved object or anything like that. Then I can come in here and get my nice darker color. And don't think that just because you drew this line that it has to stay the same. You can make it a little bit bigger or smaller. Really change things around here. There we go. So now we have, I'll go ahead and delete this here, a really cool looking poster, just like a fun illustration that you can work with if you're doing any type of, graphic art or whatever. So that's basically what we have for today for gradients, but there's one more little thing that I'd like to show you, because this is what I was talking about earlier when I was like, there's some things that gradients can do that you might not necessarily think of. I'm going to come up to Window, Artboards, and I'm going to go ahead and add another artboard here just so that I can show you. So hypothetically, since it's summertime, let's say that we're going to have a pool party and we'd like to make a really cool pool party flyer because we want to invite absolutely everybody to this, right? I'm going to go ahead and just place a picture in here that I had before that I've been working with. And it's a pretty large picture, so I'm just going to go ahead and scale that down. There we go. So I'm just going to make sure that this totally fits my frame here. And what I would love to have happen here is this line here is super harsh. It's not really what I'm going for. I'd like a nice kind of gradient so that if I have something that like information up at the top half that says like pool party or something like that, where it's going to be that, I would love for that to not be such a harsh transition from one to the next. So we're actually going to play with creating a mask here. And what that means is I'm going to go ahead and draw a rectangle here, and I'm going to have it just be a regular linear gradient, black to white, okay? Now when you're creating a mask, what you're telling the computer is that the black parts of your mask are going to be covered up and the white parts of your mask are going to be showing through. And that sounds a little confusing until you actually see it happen. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. I'm going to change my gradient, go 90 degrees. So I want it to have black at the top, white at the bottom. Super important, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and drag and make sure that I have the picture underneath and my gradient selected. And when I have both of those selected, I'm going to right click on this. Nope, it's not there. I'm going to come up to Window and click on Transparency. That's where I want to be. So where it says Transparency, you know, you have your normal transparency and everything. You have the button right here that says Make Mask. Let's click that and see what happens. Now, nothing really happened at first, right? So let's play with this a little bit and see if we can get something to happen. If you double click on this little mask area here, I've got my gradient slider. I'm going to slide this black. Oh, there we go. Something's starting to happen until it's a little bit farther down, and I really want to get rid of that white line there. There we go. Starting to look pretty good, right? And then I want to change this too, because I'd really like the bottom of this to be super opaque. I'd like to be nice and vibrant. It's a pool party after all. So you can just play with this gradient, and you're probably looking at it thinking, why is this happening? Well, with our mask here, you can see as I change this, the mask here in this little tiny window is what I'm changing. So like I said before, everything that's black on that mask is going to go ahead and cover up what is underneath it. And everything that's white is going to be transparent and showing through. So we've created this mask. We've got this nice cool gradient going on here. I'm going to click off of that, and then we can go ahead and start designing maybe a pool party. Let's say pool party. Maybe. Okay, let me click on text. Important thing to do there, you might have missed it because it's kind of subtle. I have still selected my mask. You want to make sure that when you go to start typing or you're somewhere else, you want to go ahead and go back to your normal mode there so that we can select off of that. So here we go. I go ahead and text pool party, and then I'll come over here to where it says properties, and we'll make that nice and big. Not that big. There we go. Another fun fact, you can always, if you're just a fun graphic design thing, if you're making a flyer, try to keep all of your colors around the same thing. So my text, I'm going to go ahead and just pull a color with the eyedropper tool from there. And then this is going to be the start of a fun pool party flyer. So thanks for joining me today. If you followed along and you created anything with us, we'd love to see it. Just leave it in the comments down below. If there's anything else that you'd like to see from our graphic design lessons or classes, you can also let us know about that too. And hopefully we'll see you soon. Thanks.